Most men spend their lives chasing love, validation, and happiness from women. These pursuits dominate their thoughts, and they frequently base their self-worth on their ability to win a woman's affection. But all too often, this leads to heartache and disillusionment. They fall into cycles of chasing the idea of perfect love, believing that once they find it, everything will be better. But in the end, they end up heartbroken, used, or trapped. The illusion of what love truly is and what it promises ultimately leads many men to feel lost, confused, and powerless. But what if the love and emotional connections that men are chasing aren't even meant to bring them true happiness? What if love, as most people understand it, is just a biological trick designed to fool them into fulfilling a much deeper and primal purpose? 200 years ago, a philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer exposed uncomfortable and unsettling truths about female nature, truths that most men would rather ignore or reject. Schopenhauer's observations challenge the very foundation of what we have been taught about love, attraction, and relationships. His insights are so raw and real that many men refuse to acknowledge them. What you're about to hear may be difficult to accept, but it is the key that many men will never fully understand. Schopenhauer did not believe in fairy tales, nor did he subscribe to the idea of romanticized love. He saw it for what it truly is: a biological trick, a mechanism designed by nature for one singular purpose: reproduction. Love, as we experience it in modern life, isn't a spiritual bond or destined connection. It is an illusion crafted by evolutionary forces to ensure the continuation of our species. When you feel that electric attraction, that obsessive desire, and that overwhelming conviction that she is the one, what's happening inside your brain is not some connection with her soul, but a complex and deeply rooted process of biological programming. Your brain is subconsciously calculating genetic compatibility, assessing fertility, survival advantages, and evaluating potential for reproduction. Your mind isn't making an emotional connection. It's engaged in a primal calculation designed to guide you towards the best genetic match. Women, in turn, have the same underlying biological programming, though their attraction is based on different priorities. Schopenhauer wrote that love is the ultimate goal of almost all human effort. It is more important than anything else in life, but he did not mean this in a romantic sense. He meant that love, in the way most people experience it, is not some divine or mystical bond. Instead, it's a fleeting and superficial chemical high, a survival mechanism designed by nature to ensure the propagation of the species. Schopenhauer's philosophy may seem harsh or even misogynistic at first, but it's important to understand that his views were grounded in a cold, objective reality. It was never about degrading women. It was about understanding the evolutionary imperatives that drive both male and female behaviors. He recognized that women are more often ruled by instinct and emotion than by reason, and that these instincts drive their attraction and behaviors. This is not about condemning women, but about recognizing the profound biological forces that shape their actions. Women are hardwired to seek out the best possible mate for survival, for the protection of their offspring, and for the perpetuation of their genes. The behaviors that seem like a natural desire for affection and attention are often rooted in these deeper evolutionary imperatives. For instance, take a look at modern dating apps, where 80% of women are competing for the attention of only the top 20% of men. This isn't coincidence or a result of societal pressures. This is biology at work. Women instinctively want the strongest, most dominant and most capable men, the ones who can provide security, resources, and genetic superiority. This is the same instinct that has guided human reproduction for thousands of years, and it doesn't change simply because society tells us that we should all be equal. Now consider the consequences of this biological dynamic. Men who invest heavily in relationships, offering affection, time and resources, often end up disappointed, especially when they realize that the devotion they've shown may not result in the loyalty or commitment they were hoping for. Many men believe that love is mutual, that if they sacrifice enough, care enough, and prove their worth, they will be rewarded with affection and devotion. But Schopenhauer warned, to be loved, one must not be just, but clever. Women don't fall for the nice guy who sacrifices his needs for theirs. They are drawn to men who display strength, physical, social, financial, and psychological. Strength means power, control, and the ability to lead. Schopenhauer's insights into love and attraction go beyond what most men are comfortable confronting. One of the key concepts he explored is what he called the tragedy of possession. The thrill of a woman's attraction doesn't come from simply having her. It's rooted in the chase, the pursuit. Once the conquest is over, once a man has secured the woman he desires, the attraction begins to wane. The thrill evaporates, and what was once an exhilarating connection becomes a mundane reality. This dynamic is a central part of the biological forces at play. Nature has designed it this way. Women's instincts are not driven by a desire to nurture a long-lasting, stable relationship in the way many men imagine. Rather, their biological imperative is to secure the best possible mate for reproduction, ensuring that the species continues to thrive. Once this goal is met, the need for a man's devotion fades, and the pursuit of novelty or other desirable traits takes over. This is why many men who cling too tightly to a woman, who become overly dependent or obsessed, inevitably watch her. They pull away. It's not because women are cruel, it's because this is how nature has shaped their instincts. The moment a man places all his worth into the relationship or makes a woman the center of his world, he's lost the game. Schopenhauer's lesson here wasn't about hating women. It was about understanding the forces that drive human behavior. When a man stops viewing these dynamics as personal and starts seeing them through the lens of biology, he can then change how he interacts with the world around him. The key isn't to blame women or demand loyalty. It's to stop viewing love as a fantasy. Love, as Schopenhauer saw it, is a negotiation. The man who negotiates from a position of weakness will always lose. Modern society often promotes the idea of equality in relationships, but this doesn't align with biological reality. Despite what the social narrative might tell us, women hold a tremendous amount of leverage in romantic and sexual dynamics. This leverage doesn't come from malice. It comes from the biological roles women are naturally inclined to play in human reproduction. From an evolutionary perspective, women are the selectors in the game of attraction, not the chosen ones. From the moment puberty hits, a woman's value in the sexual marketplace is at its peak. Her youth and beauty are her most valuable assets, and she instinctively knows how to use them. Men, on the other hand, are in a constant state of building their value. A man's worth in the dating world is determined by his struggle, his status, and his ability to survive and provide for others. Unlike women, who are born with the physical traits that immediately make them valuable in reproduction, men must build their worth over time. Schopenhauer's blunt assertion, women are suited to being the nurses and teachers of our childhood, by the very fact that they themselves are childish, frivolous, and short-sighted, is not an insult, but a reflection of how evolutionary pressures shaped the roles of men and women. Women's primary value in relationships, from a biological perspective, lies in their fertility, their ability to bear children, and their nurturing nature. Men's value, however, is often tied to their ability to provide, protect, and achieve success in society. The paradox that modern men face is difficult to navigate. On one hand, they are encouraged to show emotional vulnerability and embrace a more sensitive side, Yet women remain most attracted to dominant alpha males who exude strength and confidence. This paradox creates confusion for men who are unsure of what women truly desire. Society tells them that gender roles should be equal, but biology often dictates otherwise. Schopenhauer's philosophy took a deeper look at the psychological forces that shape attraction. Women, unlike men, have an invisible and often underestimated weapon: emotional influence. While men engage in battles with physical force, social status, or logic, women have developed the ability to manipulate perception, social dynamics, and even reality itself to maintain control over relationships and romantic interactions. One of the most profound observations Schopenhauer made was that women do not challenge men directly. They don't openly confront a man's authority or try to flex their power in ways that are immediately visible. Instead, they employ subtle tactics that men often don't recognize or understand. Women manipulate reality with near supernatural accuracy, reading micro-expressions, tone shifts, and social dynamics with ease. Men often believe they are having straightforward conversations, engaging in logical exchanges, or asserting dominance. But women, often unconsciously, are conducting their own psychological tests. These tests, such as the compliance test, how quickly you rearrange your schedule for her, the frame test, whether you stand your ground or cave to her emotions, and the investment test, if you chase her more than she chases you, are how women evaluate a man's value. Schopenhauer's ultimate lesson wasn't about defeating women, but rather transcending the game entirely. Modern men often make one fatal error. They believe happiness and fulfillment come from female validation. This belief is rooted in societal conditioning, where men are taught that their worth is determined by the love and approval of women. But Schopenhauer saw through this illusion long before it became a cultural norm. The truth is, true happiness comes from self-mastery, not from external validation, especially not from women. The men who thrive are not those who chase love or approval from others. They are the ones who conquer themselves first. These men don't depend on external validation to define their self-worth. They are men of purpose, self-discipline, and unshakable confidence. By focusing on their own growth, they attract what they desire naturally. They aren't trying to win a woman's love because they understand that love is not the end goal. It's the byproduct of living a life of purpose and value. Schopenhauer's wisdom here becomes revolutionary. The first step toward true freedom is recognizing the chains that bind us. Once you understand that the dynamics of love, attraction, and relationships are driven by biological forces, not personal shortcomings, you can stop blaming others. The shift in mindset is profound. Instead of begging for love or loyalty, you learn how to inspire it. The man who understands his own value doesn't need to chase women or compete for their attention. He attracts it naturally. This leads to what Schopenhauer considered the 3 pillars of unshakable masculinity, the principles that help men build lives that attract respect and admiration, not just from women, but from the world at large. These pillars are economic sovereignty. A man who controls his finances controls his fate. Money, in Schopenhauer's view, isn't just about wealth, it's about freedom. The man who is financially independent is not at the mercy of others. He has the power to make his own choices and live life on his terms. Economic independence provides the foundation for all other forms of personal sovereignty. Philosophical depth. Most men live their lives on autopilot, mindlessly following societal scripts and narratives. The exceptional man, however, cultivates a mind that is sharp enough to see through these lies. He reads, learns, and questions everything. He engages with the world critically and philosophically, rejecting the default narratives imposed by society. The ability to think for oneself is the hallmark of a truly powerful man. Physical mastery. The body isn't just a tool for attracting women. It is the vessel through which your will is manifested. Schopenhauer believed that a weak body breeds a weak will. A man who neglects his physical health and strength is not only vulnerable in the face of adversity, but he also undermines his ability to exert control over his life. Physical mastery is a symbol of a man's overall mastery of his own life. Once a man embraces these three pillars, he no longer seeks validation from others. He commands it. He becomes the prize. This is the power of self-reliance, and it is the path to liberation from the social and emotional traps that most men find themselves ensnared in. The battle between men and women isn't personal. It's biological theater playing out across millennia. The battle is not about winning women or conquering their affection. It's about understanding the biological forces that shape our behavior and interactions. The man who wakes up to these truths stops blaming others and begins evolving. He stops resenting women for playing by the rules of nature and begins adapting to them. Schopenhauer's ultimate revelation is this: we forfeit parts of ourselves to fit into societal molds. We spend our lives chasing illusions. The illusion of perfect love, the illusion of success through validation, the illusion that happiness comes from external sources. These illusions are ingrained in us by culture, media, and societal expectations. But the man who transcends these illusions, who no longer seeks validation from others, gains a freedom that few ever experience. The choice is yours. Continue chasing fleeting illusions, or step into your true power. The red pill is not about hating women or rejecting relationships. It's about rejecting the societal narratives that have been ingrained in you. It's about loving the truth enough to rebuild yourself in its image. Once you see the truth of the biological forces at play, you begin to understand that life is not about seeking validation. It's about self-mastery. True power lies in self-reliance. This is where the modern man separates himself from the desperate masses. He understands that happiness and fulfillment are not found through external sources, but by mastering his own mind, body, and spirit. He builds a life so compelling that women and others around him must either meet his standards or watch from the sidelines. This shift in mindset is where your real life begins. By building yourself up, by focusing on your own growth and sovereignty, you step into your true power. The man who wakes up to these truths stops living for others and begins living for himself. He stops chasing illusions of love and approval and begins creating a life so extraordinary that those around him are drawn to it naturally. Schopenhauer's most liberating truth was one that most men will never fully grasp. The most dangerous lies aren't the ones women tell men, they're the ones men tell themselves. Most men are trapped in a cycle of self-deception, believing that if they just sacrifice more, care more, and provide more, they will win the elusive affection and loyalty they crave. This mindset is one of the greatest traps in modern life. It's a false belief in the idea that devotion alone is enough to ensure lasting love and happiness. The truth, however, is much harsher and more empowering. This self-deception creates a desperate, needy man who lives for the approval of others, especially women. But the moment a man makes another person, especially a woman, his entire world, he loses his power. He becomes subservient, and in doing so, he diminishes his own value. Schopenhauer's red pill truth is this: the man who sacrifices his own sovereignty in the pursuit of a woman's approval is the one who loses. The man who builds a life of purpose and self-reliance, who is independent and whole, becomes irresistible not because he seeks affection, but because he has created a life that others cannot help but admire. Once a man sees through the illusions of modern love and relationships, he can no longer be deceived by the false narratives that have been ingrained in him. He stops chasing affection and begins to focus on the real source of power, self-mastery. Schopenhauer's philosophy teaches us that the greatest strength comes from within, from knowing who you are, understanding your value, and acting in alignment with your highest self. The man who understands this doesn't need to chase validation or approval. He attracts it naturally by simply living in accordance with his own principles and values. The modern world pushes men to conform to a social script that is fundamentally flawed. Men are told to pursue women at all costs, to prove their worth through sacrifice and emotional vulnerability, and to live their lives seeking approval from others. This script, however, is designed to make men weak. It teaches men to define their worth based on how much they can give or how much they can please others. It encourages them to suppress their true desires and needs for the sake of external validation. Schopenhauer warned of this centuries ago. He saw how men were conditioned to accept false narratives about love, attraction, and self-worth. He understood that true power comes not from pleasing others or adhering to societal expectations, but from rejecting the social script entirely. The man who refuses to play by society's rules becomes a force unto himself. He understands that he does not need to seek validation or approval from women, from society, or from anyone. He knows that the most fulfilling path in life is the one that aligns with his authentic self. When a man rejects the social script, he stops chasing after illusions. He begins to pursue his true purpose, one that transcends the fleeting desires of the moment. The red pill is not just a metaphor, it's a way of life. It's the realization that happiness, fulfillment, and purpose come from within, not from external sources like love or validation. When a man stops chasing these external validations and starts focusing on his own growth and self-mastery, he becomes unstoppable. The societal script tells men that they must seek relationships, find love, and prioritize romantic connections above all else. Schopenhauer's lesson, however, is that a man's greatest relationship should be with himself. He must first cultivate a life of purpose, independence, and self-reliance. Once he does, everything else will follow. Relationships, love, and success in all areas of life will become natural extensions of his journey, not the goal itself. To embrace Schopenhauer's teachings is to embrace the truth of masculinity. True masculinity is not about conforming to societal expectations of what it means to be a man. It's about forging your own path, aligning with your deepest desires, and rejecting the pressures to be something you're not. Masculinity, in its purest form, is about strength, independence, and purpose. It's about living a life that is so compelling, so filled with meaning, that the people around you, whether women, men, or society at large, must either meet your standards or step aside. Masculinity is not about the pursuit of external validation, but the internal drive to create something powerful, something meaningful. It's about building a life that others are drawn to naturally, without having to beg for attention or affection. The man who understands this does not need to chase relationships or women because his very presence attracts respect. His confidence, his purpose, and his inner strength make him magnetic. Schopenhauer's red pill truth is that true masculinity is not about dominance over others. It's about mastery of oneself. This is where modern men must evolve. They must let go of the outdated ideas of love and relationships that have been sold to them by society. They must stop viewing women as the key to happiness and instead focus on building a life that is unshakable. The man who masters himself, his mind, his body, and his purpose becomes unstoppable. He commands respect, he attracts admiration, and he builds a life that others can only envy. Once a man understands that masculinity is about self-mastery, his entire perspective on relationships and life changes. No longer does he seek love as a means to an end. He creates a life so compelling that love becomes a natural byproduct of his success. The man who follows this path is truly free, free from the societal pressures, the need for validation, and the endless pursuit of fleeting desires. He becomes the ultimate prize. The battle between men and women isn't personal. It's a biological theater playing out across millennia. The man who wakes up to these truths stops blaming others and starts evolving. He stops resenting women for playing by the rules of nature and begins adapting to them. He rejects the false narratives of society, the illusions of love, and the need for external validation. Instead, he builds a life rooted in purpose, power, and self-reliance. Schopenhauer's ultimate lesson is this: we forfeit parts of ourselves to fit into societal molds. The choice is yours. Continue chasing illusions or step into your true power. The red pill isn't about hating women, it's about loving truth enough to rebuild yourself in its image. This is where your real life begins. True power lies in self-reliance. When you stop seeking love, approval, or fairness, you become the prize. You create a life so compelling, so rich with purpose, that those around you are drawn to it. This is the essence of Schopenhauer's wisdom: to live according to your own principles, to master your own mind, and to become the kind of man who commands respect and admiration without seeking it. The red pill is not a rejection of women, it's a rejection of the illusions that society has placed upon men. It's the awakening to the truth of your own power, your own purpose, and your own journey. And once you've embraced this truth, you will find that the world opens up to you in ways you never imagined.